You are not going to charge your cell phone or drive on a car or sit in a restaurant or have your baby in a hospital or cheer in a stadium if it wasn't constructed. And so civilization physically would not exist if not for construction. So that's one of my key messages out to the world is why I love the industry so much. And we're full of humble people that solve very complicated technical problems to allow all of us to exist. They're like, you're gonna send Gretchen out to do my strategic plan. I think I need like a David or a John or a Scott to come out and do my strategic plan. And at the time, I appreciated this, but I appreciate it much more now. Lou's response was, well, you're going to need to find another consulting firm because Gretchen's an important member of our team. I was on a board of a construction company, and we lost someone that was a professional athlete before they came to us. And they said, well, they just weren't tough enough for the industry. And I asked 7 executives, what is substantial completion? And got 7 different answers. So taking that time to create real alignment on behaviors and metrics and how we're going to report out and how we're going to resolve issues, that upfront investment pays huge dividends. But to pick up the phone and say, hey, Scott, something's happened here. And it not just start throwing inflammatory statements at one another, because I've seen that happen on projects, but being able to sit down and say, here's our understanding of the situation. What's your understanding? I knew once I started on women's leadership, that's the box I was going to be put in. Never done it before, right? And I worked very hard to sit at very senior tables as an equal in strategy. And I just went, you know what? I'm done. I'm done with that. I don't have anything to prove to anybody anymore.
Welcome, everybody, to the next episode of the Mobilization Mindset. My name is Scott Pieper, CEO and founder of Mobilization Funding, and today we are going to dive deep into construction. I have a guest here who has 40 years of experience across all aspects, especially leadership. She definitely knows something about women in construction, filling the gap of leadership, and I am excited to talk to her and share with you Dr. Gretchen Gagel. She is 40 years in construction and the founder of Women Thriving in Construction, a global institute, and she is a member of the National Academy of Construction. Dr. Gagel, welcome.
Thank you, Scott. Happy to be here.
Likewise. So I'm excited to have you on here. I have not had too many people with as much experience in time and tenure in construction. And I'm curious to touch on a lot of that experience today and get a feel for our audience to allow them to see like the evolution of construction, how big of an industry it is, the impact it's made. Maybe touch a little bit on your experience overall, give everybody a little bit of a taste on where you're from and what you've done and how you've gotten so passionate in the industry.
Yeah, well, I'll start with the the big idea that I love construction. And I came into construction after a career in manufacturing, running manufacturing plants after engineering school. And 1994, I joined FMI Corporation, woman number two. I think we had 170 employees in there. I think there were 2 female consultants and investment bankers at that time. But little did I know how much I would come to love the construction industry. And I've always worked on the strategy side. So I used to advise General Motors, Intel, Starbucks, Marriott, built a Baltimore Ravens stadium, how to build billions of dollars of construction in the most cost-effective way. The focusing on women thriving thing is about a 6-year journey for me in kind of as I sail off into the sunset, creating my legacy. But what I love about the industry, and I try and tell people outside the industry, we build and maintain the assets of civilization. You are not going to charge your cell phone or drive on a car or sit in a restaurant or have your baby in a hospital or cheer in a stadium if it wasn't constructed. And so civilization physically would not exist if not for construction. So that's one of my key messages out to the world is why I love the industry so much. And we're full of humble people that solve very complicated technical problems to allow all of us to exist.
It's interesting. And I think your background in mechanical engineering and, your degree there, getting into that aspect of it, you utilize it in manufacturing, but what transitioned you into the construction industry from manufacturing that led to that? And I know, like you said, you got the job at FMI Corp, but what
Mhm.
really made your passion shift?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. My father was a construction equipment dealer, Komatsu, Barber Green pavers. And when I told him I was going to engineering school and when I turned down my Harvard acceptance, he actually disowned me. He said girls don't do engineering, and we didn't speak for a couple of years. Um, I the opportunity to join Ralston Purina was to be the first female operations manager for them. So I never actually worked as an engineer. I I thought, well, they have 62 operations managers and they've never had a woman, so I might as well be the first one to go do that, right? But even in manufacturing, I was putting big equipment installations in and things like that. And I took my electives in civil. I took design of steel structures. I loved that. I took water and wastewater treatment. So I've really just always been fascinated by how things come together. So when I actually, I was joking in a speech the other day, I answered an ad in the paper back when we had ads in the paper in
I
the
don't know how many
business.
people are going to be able to recognize
I
that name.
know, but FMI had an ad in the paper for a consultant, and my then husband said they wanted me to move from Denver to LA. I was managing a Coca-Cola bottling facility, and he said, "Why don't you go give this a shot?" And yeah, and I did.
I love it. So what did you learn at FMI Corp that really kept you in construction though, and never pivoted from there? Because FMI focused a lot on that, and I actually had the episode isn't out yet, but we had Scott Kimpland on as a guest recently. You may know him. He's been there 30 plus years now.
Yeah. I started out in his group. So we were in the same group. It was called the Quality and Productivity Improvement Group, QPIG. It was run by Lou Bainbridge and Bill Aberger. And so Bill was in Florida, where Scott was, and Lou was in Denver, where I was. And I learned a couple of things, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Everything has a good, a bad, and an ugly side. And I learned about male allyship. So Lou Bainbridge, in fact, we were just emailing back and forth. We had contractors that they're like, you're gonna send Gretchen out to do my strategic plan. I think I need like a David or a John or a Scott to come out and do my strategic plan. And at the time, I appreciated this, but I appreciate it much more now. Lou's response was, well, you're going to need to find another consulting firm because Gretchen's an important member of our team. And for him to do that back in 1994, 30 years ago, turn down revenue to stand up for me, that's male allyship. I also learned, well, I just learned a lot about the industry and I learned to I put a sign up in my office that said "Wild ducks congregate here," and I have a picture of a sign in the book because I actually found it as I was writing the book. It's this giant sign, "Wild ducks congregate here." Our vision is to lift the industry, and my personal mission is to leave the world a better place than I found it. So I learned to really seek out the people and the teams and the organizations that wanted to push the boundaries of improving the industry. And I think that's why I was nominated into the National Academy of Construction. I've always just cared deeply for the industry, but sought out people that think, gosh, we're not broken. We're great, but there's some things we can improve.
So why do you think construction gets such a bad rap?
Oh, what do people see right now? I'm in Kansas City for 3 weeks. We were just talking about I'm in the same city for 3 weeks and how exciting that is. Someone who spends 200 nights a year in a hotel, you don't end up in the same city for 3 weeks, but there's a highway construction project going on between where I live and where my daughter and son-in-law and my new grandson live. And it has created a traffic jam, like a parking lot during rush hour. That's what people see. And I try to explain to them that we don't have magic wands. It's not like we have little gremlins that could come in at night and and resurface an entire highway. They see the disruption of it. And I think that's unfortunate. I think we need a hit Netflix series. I think if we can make them about attorneys and doctors and all kinds of other people about how cool construction is, but I think for the most part, most of the population focuses on the disruption we create when we reconstruct or construct something.
Yeah. You know, I have a thought too. Back longer ago, buildings were built a lot differently. There was a sentiment of like what we're going to build here from a beauty perspective and an architectural
Mhm.
standpoint. And you go into these cities and towns, and Kansas City is certainly one of them. You find the oldest buildings, and they are the most beautiful. They're the ones that were, very, very old. You find the newest construction. Sometimes it looks new, but it doesn't look good, and it
Yeah.
doesn't look like it was this amazing construction. So I think a lot of construction as of course economy's grown and it gets more expensive, square footage is square footage, but a little bit of the beauty has been lost, I think. And so there's not as much admiration for what was built in certain buildings as they may have once in the past, like the federal courthouses and, or the city hall. Those some of those buildings just aren't the same as they used to be. And I don't know if that's impacted society as much of it, along with this the stress it can cause. But in your example there, a pretty road's a pretty road. That always looks good at the end of the day, and everyone loves driving on it. But I think in the building world, vertical construction, I think some of the beauty's lost, and I think that might have a little bit to do with it.
Yeah. Well, I think there's two sides to that coin. There are architects I am pay different that are building amazing buildings. I was in Dubai a few years ago, that we see these beautiful structures. And I think I lived in Denver for 28 years when Barton Mallow built Coors Field. And it was one of the first baseball stadiums where you could walk around the entire stadium and there's no barrier to seeing the field the entire way around. And that's something that the fans appreciate. So I think their beauty and functionality. Um, I think of a manufacturer that added skylights in all their plants and improved their productivity by 10% because people have natural light. So thinking about how buildings can be enablers, but of course those gorgeous old buildings are amazing and that craftsmanship. We build in a different way. We build with different materials, and it's going to elicit a different feeling about the beauty of those
Mhm.
buildings.
Yeah. So construction's going through a lot of change, a lot of transformative change. Depending on what stats you look at, upwards of 50% or more of the current workforce is going to age out and retire.
Yep.
A new workforce is coming in, lots of new technology, lots of costs, lots of issues, lots of global impact to just even the US construction industry, let alone the world construction industry. Which companies, what are companies that are winning or are going to win in your opinion? What are they doing right now that others aren't?
Yeah. So it's interesting. We are seeing this shift to it. We're not a broken industry, by the way. I love the industry. And as I talked about, it's this incremental improvement to where we're headed. Turner and Mortensen, for example, going to 100% flushing toilets on their job sites, trying to professionalize so that when you come onto a job site, you feel like you're treated like not just a human being, but uh, valued as that trade worker that is so critical to making a job happen. So, seeing some of those changes, more of a focus on mental well-being. We know we're one of the worst industries in suicide, and it's pressure, it's travel, thinking creatively about does the person who opens the gate in the morning need to be the person that closes it at night? Do we have to grind everybody down? And I was on a board of a construction company, and we lost someone that was a professional athlete before they came to us. And they said, well, they just weren't tough enough for the industry. And I'm like, they were a professional athlete, male professional athlete. So I think realizing that, and it's hard. The people that have been in the industry for 30 years, they say, this is how I did it. I toughed it out. I survived this, I endured this, but that doesn't mean that the next generation has to endure those things.
Mhm. What are there any external factors in the construction industry that you think are extraordinary when you look at manufacturing industry, for example, or others, maybe the retail, the restaurant industry that just make it so much more difficult, aside from the wear and tear, like you said, the pressure cooker, like, but just macroeconomic factors or industry facts that just aren't just extraordinary to construction that aren't there for others.
Yeah, well, we're cyclical. We go through an economic cycle, and I know that manufacturing companies do as well. And even my first plant was a dog and cat food plant, and dogs and cat eat more in the winter, so we always had to run 7 days a week from about October to February. But we're very cyclical. We see big downturns where we have to tighten our belts, and big upturns where a lot of contractors get out over their skis and run out of working capital and go bankrupt. So I think that's one thing about construction. The other thing is that, and this is why I studied leadership in my PhD, but I also studied organization culture and change management and agility. We form and reform teams constantly to an extent that is not being done in most organizations. And we talk about rapidly reconfigurable resources is a phrase I came up with studying agility. And all organizations have to, in some way, move people around. But think about it. We take a bunch of people, there upwards of 200 organizations on a stadium, for example. So we're taking people from 200 organizations and saying, you're a team for 18 months. And that's one of the things I started out doing in the 90s is partnering, really coming together and forming. I'm looking, I had a coaster. It's not sitting here. I worked on a $3 billion program with General Motors in about 10 years ago. Three, 3 years, 4 sites, 3 sites in the US, a site in Mexico. And we really took the time as executives up front to define the culture of the program, the accepted behaviors, et cetera. But most of the time we're just on the go. We're one project to the next. We don't know the people we're working with. We don't know the other trades, and it's really hard to form teams that way.
So what do you think the best general contractor project managers do to form those ideal teams, and what characteristics do they have?
Yeah. So one of the best projects I've ever worked on. I wish I'd kept a list of every project I've worked on, and I really have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. The Baltimore Ravens Stadium, Alice Hoffman was the owner's rep, which in 1996 was unusual to have a woman as the owner's rep for the Baltimore Ravens. And she took HOK, Whiting Turner, Barton Mello, HOK. Um, I'm trying to think of a couple of the other contractors out into the woods, and we did Outward Bound for a day. At the very beginning, bust all the executives, all the major trades, everybody. And boy, was there a lot of grumbling going on in that bus. And we did a day of Outward Bound. We did trust building. We did communication skills. Then we spent 2 days in a meeting room defining our issue resolution process, defining our key metrics. I was on one project, I asked 7 executives, what is substantial completion? And got 7 different answers. So taking that time to create real alignment on behaviors and metrics and how we're going to report out and how we're going to resolve issues, that upfront investment pays huge dividends.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that. That's actually a great, well, the principles of that are excellent. How you go about doing it, being creative in doing it is really the art of that. But without those, it's pretty hard to measure. If you don't know what you're shooting at or you don't know what the defined terms are, it's really hard to be successful because no one knows whether you got there or not.
Yeah. Well, we say substantial completion. Okay. We all agree that's a term, right? But
Hmm.
when I went around the room to those 7 executives, because we were just building the buildings that the process equipment was going in. And so there was like, well, the buildings are at this phase. Nope, they're at this phase, this phase, this phase. And it was a lengthy conversation for us to be able to document that and then share that with 25 leaders and 60 leaders and all the subcontractors. That takes time to build that alignment, but it's really critical.
Yeah. So on one note, it's a little interesting question I want to ask you from your experience. So thinking like a project like the Raven Stadium, for example, just any big project, there's lots of general contractor or there's a general contractor or multiple and a lot of trade contractors.
Hmm.
Very rarely does the architect and the engineer nail the scope of work perfectly, such that there's never a change order, right?
Yep.
And change orders can create a lot of confusion and angst and problems on a job from the entire circuit, from the owner on down, because of just the nature of construction's not cheap and solutions cost money, and someone has to bear the cost of that. Most A lot of trade contractors watch our show or listen to the podcast, and it's an issue. How do you recommend, or would you recommend, a trade contractor manage a change order to lead to the best possible outcome and success such that it doesn't turn into the thing that actually ruins them?
Right. I think it starts with the relationships. Because when you have a strong relationship, then you can sit down and have the right conversation with people. And I'll give you an example. Right before I moved to Australia in 2018, my team helped Procter and Gamble implement lean practices globally. And they instituted this, I don't remember what they were calling it, like a pre-construction design review meeting. And I popped in on one. My team was running in I think Utah. And it was the steel erector that really stepped up as the trade partner that helped us resequence and take about 3 months out of the project. But getting everybody in a room where you can communicate, become human beings to one another, realize we're all focused on the same things, right? We all the owner wants value for money. The contractors need to make money. We don't want contractors to not make money, right? Because then we don't have contractors. And so building those relationships so that you can sit down and say, um, and the firing of emails, email is so productive because I travel so much. I spend a lot of my time communicating with people on email, but to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, Scott, something's happened here," and it not just start throwing inflammatory statements at one another because I've seen that happen on projects, but being able to sit down and say, here's our understanding of the situation. What's your understanding? Seek first to understand, get them to talk to you. And and yeah, hopefully you have reasonable people that you're dealing with that you can have reasonable conversations. And sometimes you can't, and then you end up in litigation.
Right. And then really nobody wins at that point either.
No, no, but it starts with relationships and trust. If I could take like magic fairy dust and sprinkle it on the construction industry, it would be of trust. Because somehow we walk into, and I used to talk about like Santa bag of things that had happened to me on other projects. Like I got screwed on this project when this happened. That's never happening again. I'm not going to trust. I'm not going to share. I'm not going to be transparent.
Mhm.
And back to that Baltimore Ravens stadium example, massive transparency, sharing of information, and fun. They actually created a CD of songs. Someone wrote a song at every monthly update they had on the agreed upon metrics, back to transparency. But without relationships, it's and trust, it's very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, all you have to do is follow the changes that a general contractor made to the AIA subcontract agreement, and you can see what problems they've had in the past. It's not difficult to see. I've solved for that. That clause solves for
Yeah,
this problem. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So your book is called Building Women Leaders. Talk about that. What made you want to write a book? How has leadership and your experiences got into that? You mentioned earlier in the show that that's now become a passion and a part of your legacy. How so and why?
Well, I never set out to write this book. It's funny how the universe starts telling you things. So when I moved to Australia, I had no idea how I was going to earn a living. Literally, I'd been president of a company for 5 years, working with United Airlines. Ironically, I spent a lot of time on them. General Motors, Procter and Gamble example, and doing my PhD on the weekends. And I was pretty burned out when I got to Australia. And I thought, well, we're only going to be here for a couple of years. I'll figure it out. I'll figure out some way to have a positive impact. And Quanta Services was a client at the time. and they own 5 companies in Australia. And Mark Bumstead, who runs Australia, suggested I join the Australian Pipelines and Gas Association, which I did. And 2 weeks after moving to Australia, I delivered a paper on energy company contractor alliances. After San Bruno happened with PG&E, little did we know they were going to have a worse problem after that, but PG&E drove a lot of alliance contracting because of increased integrity management of pipelines. And the CEO at the time he still is, Steve Davies of APGA, had a senior leader panel, and he stood in front of the audience. We were in Darwin, and said, "I'm very embarrassed there's not a woman on this panel. We have to do better." And I thought, okay. So I was living in Canberra at the time. They were based there. I took him out for coffee and said, "The American Gas Association has a women's leadership program. Maybe we could replicate it in Australia." Now we've done 10 cohorts of that. Wiley, author acquisition person, starts following me on LinkedIn and asked me to write this book. And it was soon after I'd been inducted into the National Academy of Construction. And as you can imagine, being in a new country, I knew once I started on women's leadership, that's the box I was going to be put in. Never done it before, right? And I worked very hard to sit at very senior tables as an equal in strategy. And I just went, you know what? I'm done. I'm done with that. I don't have anything to prove to anybody anymore. I'm going to write this darn book. And then I decided to start a global institute, womenthrivingin construction.org. And I'm all in, Scott. I'm still sitting on boards. I sit on the GHD Engineering Global Risk Committee. They're a $3 billion engineering firm. I think we need female role models on boards. But whatever I can do in the last decade of my career in construction to help us more fully embrace women and to help women be successful, I'm all in.
Yeah. So what unique things do you think women in particular bring to the construction industry that often is missed from the male perspective?
Yeah. You're not the first person to ask me that, and I kind of absolutely don't know. But what I do know, one of the rabbit holes I went down during my PhD is that there's a lot of research on how diverse teams make better decisions. And I'll use a really simple example. I'm having an antique lamp restored that a portrait of my grandfather. The lamp is in the portrait. The lampshade doesn't have the prongs on it anymore. And I went into a store, and one person went, "No, I don't think we can fix that." And then another person walked over and they started brainstorming, and then another person, and the four of us came up with a solution to buy a new shade of the same size and slip the old one over it. And but four people, none of us would have come up with that decision on our own, and we were a very diverse group. So whether it's socioeconomic background, whether it's age, like you started out, Scott, Gretchen, you have a lot of experience. I'm I'm getting used to people saying that to me because deep down inside I feel like I'm 25 years old still. But
Mhm.
diverse
Well, I think
groups,
we probably stay about 25. Our physical body
probably.
changes, but the rest of us doesn't really change that much.
No, no, I've got runner's knee right now, so don't get me started on body. But there's just a lot of research that the IQ of a team, the ability of a team to solve a problem, is not based on the collective IQ of the people on the team. It is based on the diversity of thinking on the team. And so
100%.
women bring a different perspective.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Just in reading lots of books over time, you can just there's just no denying the fact of when you put a bunch of people in a room, the brain, the computing power of multiple brains working towards one problem is well documented. I think the book Think and Grow Rich, and Napoleon Hill probably said it first in his original book copy, which is one of my favorites of all time. And I still sit in my meditation or prayer time and I access, as many brains as I can and gather ideas and thoughts and try not to, it's not the one person's idea that comes about. It's the idea, the question, and that it just triggers everybody thinking in the same general direction. And if you point everyone there as a leader and bring as many ideas together and just open up the door for No comment is bad. Say what's exactly on your mind. Please just blurt it out. And you kind of get a whiteboard and you just throw all those ideas up there. It's just shocking how, quite frankly, it's shocking how fast the answer comes out, honestly, if you do it properly and right.
Yeah, it's interesting because I do a lot of mixed gender young leader training too, because I came out of engineering school and within 5, 6 years I was managing a plant with 800 employees and nothing in engineering school prepared me for being a leader. I learned a lot of it by the seat of my pants, but we think as we progress in our careers, we're supposed to have more answers. I think we're supposed to have greater questions. Really, great leaders ask great questions and they elicit that thinking from other people and create, as you said, that psychological safety. Amy Edmondson, the Fearless Organization, how we create psychological safety because someone will be sitting there going, "Oh, this is a dumb idea." Uber. I mean, who came up with that dumb idea, right?
Exactly.
And oh, I shouldn't say this. People are going to laugh at me. They're going to make fun of me because it's so out there. And that's where we get really brilliant, innovative thinking. And that's another thing about the construction industry. We don't have space for R&D because nobody wants to do it on their project.
Right.
They're like, go try that on Joe Blow's project over there. I need this project to be on time. I'm not going to try something new. And I think we need to create more space for that innovative thinking in construction too.
Well, here's the best part. On any construction project, there's more creativity and field engineered solutions than most people probably ever care to know. And the fact that
Yeah.
you could take one set of drawings from an architect and build a giant building that clearly doesn't have all the specs that are
Yeah.
actually needed in it to construct it, hold all the weight and do everything, it's clearly being engineered with creativity and experience. And so if we all just like maybe just had the right and actual real conversation there and put some egos down and realize like that's just a fact that no one would deny happening, you probably wouldn't be so hung up on every little contract or every little issue. And you certainly would listen to someone that was willing to come to the table with a solution.
Yeah, I think some of the best people, I helped Washington Gas, our team helped Washington Gas set up alliances. I want to say it was before I left FMI in 2005, so 20 years ago. But the head, and I'm completely spacing on her name right now, was a contractor first and then went to work for the utility. And we've taken architects and made them construction project managers. And if we just had a little bit more empathy, Edgar Schein taught me about occupational cultures. So you think accountant and you think hopefully accuracy, right? Marketing, creativity. You think architect, you think engineer. I would love to see us doing more cross training. My poor son-in-law is an architect. Can you imagine having me as a mother-in-law
Yeah.
to talk about construction? And the other thing is he just got promoted, and let's invest in people's management and leadership
Mhm.
capacity. We take good engineers, good architects, good whatevers, good estimators, and we put them in charge of people. And somehow we think that they have woken up that morning and understand how to manage
Yeah.
people and build relationships. So I think that's another, and I'm seeing more of the investment in that in our industry, that the relationship building, because really relationships make all that happen, Scott. All that this is not in the spec, and we're just going to figure this out in the field and
That's
make this
right.
happen and trust each other and work together and solve problems.
Well, I think one great trait for architects would be like, you got paid up front for your design, but no one else did. So please turn this pay up around as fast as possible.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I actually worked with DPR and Kaiser Permanente on an MOB project in California where we got the payment to trades down to, I think, 8 days
Yeah,
from
that's
submittal.
amazing. I mean, because if money moves, everything could go a lot smoother. And actually, your
Yeah.
project becomes a lot more secure
Yeah.
and safe.
Who do you want to make happy on your project? The people that are actually doing the work. I think that really smart construction management general contractors, they understand that. And this excuse my language, but shit rolls downhill
Yeah.
philosophy that we have often in construction, it's just not beneficial. We did Lou Bainbridge, Bill Spraggins, and myself did some work on high performing teams back in the 90s and early 2000s where every trade contractor was treated with respect. We identified a productivity measure, so caissons, and we had boards entering the project site, and every trade had a productivity tracker, and we had all the milestones posted, and it was just a very professional approach to, okay, we need all these caissons drilled, and we need this many caissons a day to get to this, and oh, by the way, that leads to this, and being respectful about everything from lay down areas to, yeah, running it like a, I mean, running it just like a respectful collective team city. Everybody has to play their
Mhm.
part.
Absolutely. In your book, you talk about something called grounded self-leadership. What
Mhm.
is that actually? And how did and how does it help someone be a better leader on a specific project or with a team?
Yeah. Well, so when you go back and study 50 years of leadership theory, I went back to James McGregor Burns' book Leadership from 1978, and servant leadership and transformational leadership. And I've been CEO of two companies. I've chaired boards. I still advise CEOs. And so I try to kind of mash that together. And most people, leadership is very much about the interaction with other people. But I really feel like it starts with being grounded in your values and your purpose. So decades ago, I read Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And I created my personal mission statement to leave the world a better place than I found it. So when they approached me to write this book, will it leave the world a better place than I found it? I hope my book leaves the world a better. It was a hard thing to write. I hope leaves it in that. But just in our interaction today, Scott, you can probably ascertain some of the values that I stand for, right? I've
Mhm.
talked about uplifting the industry. And so being crystal clear about what you care about and what you value, and then having we talk about the head and heart of leadership, like having the courage to stand up for what you value and the humility that you don't know everything. So I think that tension, Jim Collins talks about that in level 5 leadership, the ability to think critically and analyze data and to rest your brain. We only have 4 hours of prefrontal cortex a day. Scott, you're lucky you're catching me at the end of my 4 hours of prefrontal cortex an hour later, and we would have
I've been
been
known to trigger new growth in the frontal cortex out of people, so you never
there
know.
you go.
Yeah.
And then how you take your brand out into the world so that people understand what you stand for. And that's the grounded self leadership. And the first uh, 20% of the book, eh, 15% of the book is really about that grounded self leadership, which, by the way, the book is for men and women. There's a reason Hugh Rice, Chair Emeritus of FMI, and Jen Tuckman wrote the two forwards. And there's men and women in the book. I want men to read this book too, not just to understand how to support women, but there's just a lot of darn good stuff about leadership in there.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think a lot of the principles about leadership are all sound and they work whether you're male or female. And I think there's types of leaders, certain types of leadership that men tend to gravitate to, or your average man might gravitate to, or women or your average woman might gravitate to. In your experience as a leader, do you find that there's certain characteristics that men tend to gravitate more to than women and vice versa?
Well, my neuroscientist friends, Kristen Hansen, who wrote a book, Traction, I have multiple. I'm very fascinated. We're learning so much about the brain because of fMRIs. Our brains are physically different. Um, and I'm using Kristen Hansen's terminology, so I hope I don't offend anybody listening, but women have like a 12-lane superhighway between the right and left side of our brain physically. Men have what she calls an old country lane. And that's the physical side if you were to do like an autopsy on our brains. Um, we just think in different ways. And it's not right or wrong. The book, I say, this is not about white male bashing. White males are the predominant population in the construction industry. So you all have created the dominant culture. And what I would so yes, we bring different things. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know exactly what those different things are. But we also bring a different lived experience that How many times have you been asked if you're a flight attendant, Scott?
Never actually.
Okay. So last year, I flew to the AGC's Diversity and Inclusion Committee meeting in DC, and I'm in a suit and I get in an Uber and young male driver, and he says, "Oh, are you having a busy week?" And I said, "Yeah, in Kansas City, Chicago, DC, New York." And he says, "Oh, are you a flight attendant?" And I was a little worried about what I was wearing, that I looked like a flight attendant, but this is not the first time I've been asked if I'm
You
a flight
didn't fit
attendant.
the wings when you were a kid and still keep wearing them when you're gone, do
Yeah.
you? Yeah.
Yeah, and so I just try and graciously lift up unconscious bias. And in this instance, I said, "No, I'm a business executive." And I said, "Do you think if I were a man, you would have asked me that question?" And he said, "No, I probably wouldn't have, and I probably would have asked you if you were a pilot." And we all need bias. It helps us sort information really quickly, so we don't have to go to our prefrontal cortex all the time. But just being you understand, Scott, that Gretchen's been asked 100 times if she's a flight attendant because she travels all the time. And you've never had that experience. So, because I'm in a box because I'm tall, blonde, and whatever, people put me just naturally in a different box than they do you. And so having to not defend yourself, but just kind of validate yourself constantly when you're not in that dominant culture can be exhausting.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. There's a lot of biases too. I don't have a tendency to, I'm trying to think if there's, while you were saying that, I'm trying to think if there's anything that people ever subconsciously align me to. And I don't know if it's like a trade or a specific job or thing like that. But one thing I can tell you happens to me a lot, and some may think it's fun or cool, and others may think it's positive. I'm 6'5", I'm 230 pounds, and like I can be pretty intimidating when I come in the room, just out of sheer
Mm.
size.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can work to my advantage, but a lot of times it doesn't. And the bias is that I'm gonna be whatever they always think of a 6'5",
Big
230 pound
tough.
person is. Yeah. And you just got to know it. And so once you kind of understand what your biases are internally, or if you know what people tend to think they're gonna be biased to think you are,
Mhm.
it actually can be pretty powerful when you use it properly to your advantage at the end of the day. And so it's hard to get to that point, and you got to do a lot of like you got to drop your own thoughts and promises, but you can actually use it to your advantage too in some ways. I think a lot of
Yeah.
times I had some coaches counsel us on that.
Well, I always use it as an advantage that I'm a tall blonde Gretchen in the construction industry and that people are going to remember me at a cocktail party,
Yeah.
right? And
Yep.
so I try to take that as a positive. I had a very funny thing happen at CII, the Construction Industry Institute. I introduced myself to a gentleman one night at a cocktail party. He said, "Oh, we met last night." And I looked at him. I can't believe I said this to a stranger. I said, "If one of you would dye your hair purple, it'd be great because I'd be able to tell you all apart because they're all wearing blue blazers, right?
Yeah.
Every
The,
gentleman
the
in the
navy
room
blue
is wearing."
blazer is like a dead giveaway for the
And
white man. Yeah.
and luckily he laughed. But yeah, it's interesting. I right before I left FMI, so this is 20 years ago, Hugh Rice asked me to go fill in for him at the last minute in a workshop about the state of construction in America with a board and their senior leaders. And the board said, "Oh, okay. And well, we'd like to have lunch with Gretchen beforehand." And it was a grilling. It was an absolute grilling during lunch. I had been with FMI for 11 years at that point. And it was before we let you in that room with our leaders, we want to make sure you know what you're talking about. And I know there's a little bit of that is going to happen with a man, but it's just, and then at the end, they're like, "Wow, you really do know construction." It's like, yeah, Hugh would not send an idiot to go fill in for him at this meeting. And
Mhm.
you have to have a bit of a sense of humor about it, but it can be exhausting to just have to kind of re-credential yourself constantly.
Yeah. I could definitely see that. It reminds me of a story, not nearly as interesting as yours, but funny anyway. When I was younger, I used to sell timeshare, believe it or not. That's a terrible thing. I don't like to admit that all the time, but I did. And I had a guy come up to me and ask me if I played basketball. There's
Mm.
his bias, as I happen to be tall.
Right.
And he said, "Do you?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to play. I'd play with you guys." He goes, "Great. We're having a little like pickup game tomorrow to come." I'm like, "Well, I thought you said the league started on Friday, but what was it? It was more like a tryout." So
Yeah.
I was like, "Yeah, dude, do you want me to come try out for you on Tuesday to play?" Sure, no problem. I'll go. Fine. So it's the same thing. Everybody wants to get a little warm up before they like bring you into the big show of commitment. It's kind of funny. Can
And
be
it's
annoying though
normal.
too.
It's normal to want to do that. The extent that you are, and if, as I was interviewing, and on the flip side of that, interviewing women for the book and men, so many men have had to push women to apply for a position in construction. I can't do that. I can't do that. I have a friend who's a very senior, she works for Warren Buffett. And he wanted her to become CEO of a company. And she said, "No, I'm not capable." And Warren said, "Well, you're not leaving my office till you become CEO." So that's why we need male allyship too, because a lot
Mhm.
of women inherently don't have that. I'll go try this. It's like, no, I only tick 80% of the boxes. And so I'm not going to apply for that job. And allyship, and it's women to women. We have mean girls. We still have mean girls in leadership. Women that don't support other women. I had one of those early on in my career, and I promised I wouldn't be that woman.
Mhm.
That I would totally support women. But we need you. We need men as allies to advance women in construction.
I agree. I have three daughters, and they're freshmen in college, a junior and a junior in high school and a freshman in high school. And my wife and I talk all the time, and one of the things she told me about Mean Girls. Of course, I watched the movies with them when they were, younger, but I was astonished at how um, mean really meant. I think mean, and I'm thinking of my own childhood with a bunch of guys running around. You punch each other, you tackle each other, you do something silly, you get up and just keep going. And it's mean. It's don't get me wrong, it's mean, but it's like it was different. But this kind of mean is like really what I've seen happen to some of my daughters or other women, my sister, it's mean like to the soul. Like it's like really,
Cutting.
yeah, yeah. And so now I have a whole new understanding of what mean girl means because you hear women use that term all the time, mean girls. I don't want to be a mean girl. That's a mean girl.
Mhm.
And I never understood it until my daughters were teenagers.
And the challenge, so being woman number two at FMI, there's we were at times pitted against each other. It's like there's one table at the executive leadership team. There's one table seat at that table. There's one seat at the board table. And unfortunately, by far 90% of the women in the world get it. And I think even more so. I have a specific friend in the construction industry. She wasn't a mean girl, but she'd just never been in community with women, nor had I. I left FMI at 40 and ran a women's foundation for 5 years and just it was immersed in community with women. I didn't know what community engineering school, no, manufacturing, only female operations manager. And so it's more like they've never been in community with women and they're like, why do you want to be my friend? So I can help you, right? I think that's changing. But even in writing the book, one of the senior people that I interviewed for the book, when I set out, there's 129 people in the book, Olympians. Anna Mears and I are going to Perth to speak together in 3 weeks. I can't wait. She's one of the most decorated Australian Olympians, short track. And so I sent the quotes out to all 129 to approve. And this one senior woman in construction said, "Oh, no, you can't put my quote in your book." I'm like, "Well, I interviewed for you for the book." And it was just like, "Well, I will happily remove your quote from the book. But if you don't want to hang out with all these other amazing people on my book, that's okay." But it was, yeah, it's just an interesting concept.
So in your book, along the lines of support and allies, male and female, you highlight the importance of support systems like either professional
Mhm.
groups, networks, peer groups, coaches. Why do you think that's so important, and what problem does it solve when you do utilize those avenues properly?
Yeah. I'll go back to Anna Mears, and she's actually in the book a few times. The first time I saw her speak, so she's a short track cyclist, 4 Olympics. She broke her neck and competed in an Olympics 7 months later in a crash. She broke her neck. And she was the chef de mission for the Australian team in Paris. She's just an amazing leader. The first time I saw her speak, she put a picture of herself up in the middle of a slide. And then one by one, she put up every person on her team, her nutritionist, her psychologist, her data analysis person, bing, 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 bing. And she said, "You see me as an athlete standing on a podium, but this is what makes this happen." And she said, "It's like the spokes of a wheel. If anything's out of balance, I don't perform." I have a coach. I have a coach, Vanessa, in Sydney. And people are like, "Well, you coach CEOs. Why do you have a coach?" What athlete goes into life without a coach, right? Somebody that you can talk to and improve, and mentors and sponsors and support networks. When I started my PhD at 50, I put together Team Gretchen, brand new team, people who'd done their PhD, people who are English majors, people who could help advise me to get through this. And I end the book in the conclusion about asking for help is a strength, not a weakness. The strongest people in the world know how to ask for help. They know how to um, rely on specialists. And we can't, the world is so complex, we can't know all the answers about things, right? We
Right.
just can't. And great leaders are really do an excellent job of self-reflection, but sometimes you need feedback loops, and people that support you can provide that as well.
I love that. Well, if you had 60 seconds to talk to every construction owner, what is the one thing you'd want them to know about women in construction and why it matters most to their business?
We have a 750,000 person shortage in the United States, 290,000 in Australia. And this is not just for the construction owners, this is a societal problem. Anybody tried to get an elevator repaired recently? It just took us 3 weeks in our building. Um, we need all hands on deck. And what percentage of electricians in America do you think are female? Just out of curiosity.
I'd say less than 20%.
2.4. And 10 years ago, it was 2.1, and plumbers is 1.9. We're about to publish a study with NCCER, the National Center for Education and Research, and FMI as our partners. And so when you look at 2.4% electricians, and we have a massive electrician shortage on data centers, it's business sense. This is not just like let's be nice to women thing. This
Mhm.
is we need more people in our industry. We need smarter teams, and diverse teams are smarter. And yeah, it's a business decision.
I love it. Diverse teams with great leadership will make great decisions, no doubt about it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
I have loved this. I've loved this conversation. We've gone in a lot of different directions. And I want to say, I really love that I feel respected by you as an expert in the construction industry. So thank you for giving me that space to feel as if I'm recognized as somebody who's spent a lot of time in the industry and created knowledge.
Well, you're welcome. And I'll tell you, you've earned it. Looking at your book, and we bought a copy before your show, everybody, go get Gretchen's book. It's really great. And I promise you, there is a lot of information here. And just so you know, this is not like a self-help feel-good book. This is like tactical. Here's where we go. And this is like page by page, real chapters in here, real stuff to do. Um, my team and I were talking about this, and Autumn, our marketing director, mentioned this is like a textbook type information that you could get in here. You could see this like really being utilized in a construction course. And she's right. There's no doubt about it. It's not just a regular book like the ones you might read about, oh, here's how you do this and that and this. It's really like tactical and practical. And so I think it's great. And look, there's just I have the term around here called undeniable. And when you're undeniable, it doesn't really matter what you do, what you look like, how tall you are, short you are, male, female, it just doesn't matter. So I would say that your experience and what you've done and how you've articulated it, and certainly writing it in the book, it's pretty undeniable. So someone would be a fool not to pay attention.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I hope this book is kind of a reference book that people can keep on their shelf and say, gosh, my trust is breaking down in my team. What do I do about that? Let's go read the chapter on trust. Or I
Mhm.
need a new mentor. Let's go read about how to find a mentor. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your
You're
kind
welcome.
words. Books are hard.
Books are hard. Yeah. And anyone that's ever written one or even an essay knows that it's hard. I mean, it's not easy. Where
Yeah.
can people find you, Gretchen?
My website, gretchengagel.com, on LinkedIn, Gretchen Gagel, Gagel, and the new institute is womenthrivingin construction.org.
I love it. Thank you so much. And folks, if you found any value in this, which I'm sure you have, please follow both LinkedIn and YouTube and our websites for both Gretchen and I, mobilizationfunding.com. You can also find us on our YouTube channel as well. And in the meantime, everyone, have a great week and may God bless you.